Welcome to the Therapists Uncut Podcast, where off-the-clock therapists who happen to be friends share their uncensored thoughts about real life. Join us weekly in spreading positivity and making mental health relatable through casual conversation, inspirational stories, and real talk with friends who happen to be therapists. Please welcome your co-hosts, Nikki Young, Jolene Daly, and Alyssa Nahara.
Good morning! It's not exactly morning right now, but when you're listening to the podcast on Monday morning, it certainly is. So I started this, I have to squirrel a little bit. I started it that way because every time we start the podcast, I'm going to show my age right here. I want to say, good morning, Vietnam!
Wow, I thought you were going to say good morning, America.
Yeah. No.
We are clearly in a different generation, so y'all about to age yourself too.
Robin Williams is one of my favorite actors.
Oh, okay.
Solid choice.
Yeah.
Well, welcome, Therapists Uncut listeners. We are so excited to have you back on this beautiful Monday, or whenever you are catching this episode. You caught us, if you're watching the video, you caught us examining Nikki's t-shirt today.
My hands. It's a fantastic shirt. I mean, I do feel like a little bit of a poser because it implies that I should have much larger muscles than I actually do, but I'm on the front end of that process journey. It is a good shirt. Lift heavy, pet dogs is a solid
yes.
slogan, only not so much when the podcast cuts it off as heavy pet.
So that is how we started our day today. Thank you, Nikki, for always making us smile.
Always. That was unintentional. That one was unintentional.
All right, guys, what are we talking about today?
Today we want to talk about... So to get out of Dodge or
to get the fuck out of Dodge or to not get the fuck out of Dodge.
Thank you, Nikki.
That is the question. And this is the question of your current employment, or if you have ever been in the situation where you have been at a very secure, stable job, but something isn't working, yet you continue to stay there. So today we're talking about whether to leave or not to leave, and how do you know when it's time?
Or it's working really well, but there's this light bulb in the back of your head that's just always just kind of on, right? You've got these ideas, these dreams you want to pursue, and yet you have this good job. So that's almost even harder sometimes.
Yes.
But to leave or not to leave? That's the question.
As you talk about that, there's a lot that we can squirrel off of too, because you can talk about the reasons that maybe you don't want to leave and the reasons that you do want. There's so much that we could talk about here.
Where do you want to start, Jolene?
Probably sharing a situation recently that I learned about an individual who did a fabulous job trying to stick with her employment for oh my goodness, probably like 12 or 13 months. Granted, it was through the pandemic. However, finally the person decided, this is just not working. I've done everything I possibly can. So if that's you, maybe it is time for you to move on.
So what kinds of things might one consider if they're in a place of thinking whether they want to leave their job or not?
I think pros cons lists are like my favorite go-to for this, right? Because there's, like Jolene was saying, there's so many factors. Practical factors like wage, insurance, benefits, guaranteed hours. If you've been, there's just so many practical. There's also like the secondary factors of how it's affecting you, how it's affecting your family, commute time, all of these things, right? Mm-hmm. There's maybe some of that creative factor that we talked about in terms of whether or not maybe an amazing job, amazing people, it's just not feeding your soul because you have this passion for something else. I mean, we could go on and on for the next probably 5 minutes identifying different factors.
And there are so many different scenarios that can lead one to consider whether or not they want to leave the job. The one that I often see, I work in our practice, we work with a lot of high stress professionals. The things that come into mind that Nikki mentioned are some of those burnout factors like commute time. One thing that comes up too is relationships. How good or not good are the relationships that you're in? How good are you at maintaining work-life boundaries? And how is your work life now dripping into your personal life and your relationships with your partner or your children? Is it a healthy place to be? And I usually hear a lot of poor work-life boundaries, but the pay is so good and the benefits are fantastic and the stability is on point. right? So starting one of those pros and cons list is going to be a really good starting point for you if you are in this place that you're considering it.
I saw something today too. It was a meme. I hopped on our company's social media to do some updates, and it was just the first thing I saw. And it said something along the lines of, "Can we please stop celebrating poor work-life boundaries?" is essentially what it was saying. And it's true that there are, right? I think that, within our society and culture, there's certain subsets based on probably sex, gender, nationality, race, all of that, certain subsets of the population where it's praised and rewarded and kind of put on a pedestal if maybe your work-life boundaries are so great and you do invest so much time and energy and such into work. I mean, I think it varies, but I definitely was able to pick out certain subsets that I could see where that's absolutely an issue and a pressure.
I like what you said about the pros cons list, because individuals can take a lot of different factors that they might see on that pros cons list and then do another pros cons list. The travel time, for example, in our area, a lot of people commute to the Bay Area. You have to calculate your drive time into your hourly raise or wage.
Right. Commute is one of those that on me, that's on the con side. But for some people, commuting is on the pro side of things. And I don't understand you people. Like, there's something clinically wrong with you if you enjoy commuting. But just kidding. But I mean, seriously, commuting, some people use that as their buffer between maybe a stressful job and that's their me time or it's their time to decompress or whatever it is, they enjoy it. For me, I love to drive. I absolutely hate to commute because most of the time, at least in the area that we live, that means sitting in traffic. And that is the most aggravating thing for me. So it just stresses me out. But for some people, that's a pro. It gives me 20, 30, 40, 50 minutes, whatever, to decompress, compartmentalize, and then get home and be present for my family.
Guys, I'm going to give you a warning that we might be all over the place with this episode because I think all of us just have so much that we want to say on this topic and it can go so many different directions. Do your best to keep up. We hope you stay with us.
I feel like this dynamic and this, what you just described in terms of being all over the place, I feel like that's people's brains when they're considering whether to leave or not to leave a job, though. Right?
Yeah, it's not linear. It's like cloudy and confusing, and there's so many internal conflicts that come up too.
And especially if you're the type of person who maybe is somewhat anxious, likes security, is not a fan of change, that cloud is going to be very, very murky, right? There's others of us who make a decision and bam, we do it. But for a lot of folks, this is a very cloudy, murky topic. So maybe this is just a representation of how this goes in people's brains.
It's what we've said in other episodes, though. You do you.
Boo.
You do. You have to. But you have to take the time to reflect on what you do and don't want, what's working and what's not working. And it's going to impact everybody differently. One thing that often comes up is that sense of loyalty. Right? What does it mean that if I've been with this company for so long and I've been loyal for so long, and now I'm having these thoughts of leaving when, maybe everything is good. What does that say about me?
Well, yeah. And if speaking to somebody who's been somewhere for a long time, if you have been and you've established any sort of program or departments or policies or whatnot, there can often be probably this sense of, if I step away, will this be able to continue? Or if I step away, am I going to let somebody down, like Alyssa just said? But there's so many factors, right?
Ownership and responsibility, and recognizing where is your role? Where does it end and where does it begin?
Also figuring out how you identify. Are you purely identifying with this professional role that you're in? If you were to remove that professional role from your life, then who are you? And are you comfortable and confident with that person?
A good friend of mine who's actually been a guest on this podcast, but she does this really cool adult summer camp that she works at. Well, maybe we should talk about that somewhere at some point too. But it's this kind of unplug week where professionals just go to this adult summer camp where there's absolutely no technology. There's no contact with the outside world. You're just you and all of these connection types of well, I don't want to try to describe it because I'm not going to do it justice, but something that she's identified is they try to get away from this, but when people show up, it's a lot of professionals, a lot of, in our area, the Bay Area, a lot of tech industries utilizes camp and such. And so often it's like, who are you? Okay, that's your name. And what do you do? So we get two ways that we're allowed to identify ourselves in society, our name and our occupation, right? It's like all of a sudden this dynamic person has been shrunk down to Nikki and I'm a clinician.
Combined
right?
with your education, right? How often do you also get like, oh, what did you go to school for? Oh, I actually didn't go to college. Thanks for asking. Like those three things are totally those identifiers that we kind of cling to.
Mm-hmm. And so this camp, you're not allowed to use names. You have to come up with a camp name, and then you don't talk about work. And so you just actually look, Jolene almost looks uncomfortable.
I felt it too.
But the idea is to explore who you are outside of that, right? Because there's so many other aspects, potentially, in a lot of cases, more important or as significant aspects of who you are as a human. So so imagine that, like Alyssa said, outside of your occupation, do you exist? Who are you?
I really hope our listeners are actually answering that question right now. And if you're finding that it's difficult to answer that question, it might be time to do some reflection and do a little work on yourself.
I was actually kind of thinking about what my answer was inside my head. Because for me, because I waited so long for the career that I currently have, I think the career that I chose is part of who I am. Not that I can't leave it behind in the office. I do a really good job about doing that. I am actually now in a new location. For those of you who can't see, I am back in my office rather than my home office because I've completely removed my home office and will only be working in my office. So it's just setting those boundaries, both professionally and personally, in order to have a really great work-life balance.
Let's talk about some factors to consider if you are thinking about leaving your full-time employment or part-time employment, but thinking about leaving your job, basically. If we're looking at that pros cons list that Nikki mentioned, what are some things or other things that might fall on that we have not yet mentioned yet?
I want to talk to the creative brains out there, the ones who are like committed to their 9-to-5s, their stability. So I don't know that we directly identified that. But the folks out there who are committed to that 9-to-5, but there's that other thing. I want to talk about the viability aspect of it, because I think a lot of people don't ever follow their dreams because they just assume it's not a viable business plan or employment plan. I am a firm believer, and I am a little bit of an optimist that just kind of lives in this optimistic world where you want something bad enough, you work hard enough for it, you can make it happen. But I'm a firm believer that any idea can be viable within reason. Okay, I understand we're not going to the moon in spacesuits without rockets anytime soon, but that was very random. But I'm a firm believer that if you have an idea, there's a way to get within that sphere a viable opportunity.
And is your current occupation helping you exercise that creative mind, or is it a block?
I think if you can't be fully you, for me personally, at least, if I cannot be fully me in a position, I don't want to be there. I don't care how much money they pay me. To me, it's not worth it.
No, really. And we can generalize that outside of just you and who you feel is your personality, right? I mean, we could take that to religion, race, sexuality. If you can't fully express yourself in your employment, that's a crappy, cruddy, anxiety-provoking, unfulfilling feeling.
No matter how much you get paid.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But just living with that weight, I mean, I can think of countless people who feel like, when I have to sign HR documents and identify my emergency contact, right? Can I put spouse? Oh, they're still going to figure out it's the same sex as me because of the name. And there's just that anxiety, right? Like I said, the cultural, the religious piece, the race aspect of it, that's just a crappy feeling.
I think going back to what you were saying, Nikki, all of us can attest to the fact that change when you're moving from a stable job to an unstable job can be rather scary. However, at least for the three of us, it's been well worth it.
Heck yeah.
Yeah.
I'm laughing inside when you say that because I'm actually not one of the ones that gets really scared about these things. I'm on one end of the spectrum probably where I'm like, I see it, like I'm going to jump and I'm going to work my ass off and make it happen. But I laugh because I'm the person that might be what's going on up here in my head. But what's also happening is suddenly I just, can't breathe or can't sleep or have the physical symptoms that are like, yo, brain, maybe you are a little nervous.
Which is also part of the risk, right? You're going to get super uncomfortable in these changes, whether you leave your employment to go to a different person or a different company, or you leave to start your own business, or you do a combination of both. You're going to have a lot of uncomfortable moments. So be very conscious of if you are putting all of these potentially positive, exciting things on hold purely to not be uncomfortable, then maybe it's time to reevaluate that too.
Change requires being uncomfortable. We don't change in situations where we're comfortable.
And knowledge is power. So how much of that, accurate knowledge is power. How much of that anxiety can be somewhat reduced or at least addressed by actually doing the research? So instead of just sitting there with this all spinning in the back of your head and never taking action, you can take action in the form of doing research, getting information, seeing what other options are out there. That doesn't commit you to making the change, right? That doesn't mean that in 2 weeks you're not going to have a job. It means you're out there exploring, and then you have more information to make a decision down the line.
I love that because I tell people all the time, go on interviews even. Just because you go on an interview doesn't mean that you have to accept the new position. Yeah. You can use that information in your pros cons list to decide what you want to do, what's best for you. It could also help you decide that, hey, this job that I have right here, I want. I've seen what else is out there and I want to keep this one.
Right. And because the grass isn't always greener. And this is the version of me that would have been fine just getting paid to go to school for the rest of their life because they love school so much. But I kind of compare it to school when individuals are talking about maybe a really high stress job or they feel overwhelmed or they're exhausted or some factor like that. I always kind of try to get them to look at it from back in school, whether that be grad school, college, high school, grade school. Well, maybe not grade school. I don't think you have finals in grade school, but back to when you had to study for that week or 2 weeks of intensive tests, projects, whatever. Does it kind of correlate to that in terms of this is a season, this shall pass? I've got a big project coming up. I've got to implement a program, something along those lines. And you are going to get through this and then kind of go back to a manageable, enjoyable level of chaos? Or is this perpetual? Like, is there no end coming? Is this going to be a constant? Because I think that I'm also a big believer in you got to work and you got to put effort, right? You can't just coast through life. Things that are worthwhile are going to take effort. So that doesn't mean just throwing your hands in the air and walking away when something gets hard. But it's taking a look at the big picture in terms of, is this a healthy hard? And is this a manageable hard in terms of the expectations and the time frame?
And how much of the stress is impacting your physical body? How often are you getting sick? How often are you driving to work and you're like, oh, I can't do this another day. I don't want to walk in. Because these might be signs that you are burning out from your occupation as well. If you're feeling really unmotivated to go to work, if you're feeling stuck, that's kind of one of the top red flags too. If you feel like this is where you are because it's where you have to be, doing those things like Jolene and Nikki talked about, like looking up other jobs and going to interviews, is going to help you change your mindset and open that perspective to remind yourself that you don't have to be here. If you're here, it's because you're choosing to be here. And there are other options available.
Well, and how many people, especially, right now, feel stuck in that maybe a spouse lost their employment right now because of everything going on, and they have a family. So they have to support their family. And so that leads to a feeling of being stuck as well, when maybe in typical circumstances, they would be willing to explore, to look, and to leave somewhere you've been for 5 years to start a new job when all of COVID is happening, and then there you lose that security, right? So yeah, there's a lot of factors to consider, and there is no easy one-size-fits-all answer.
In worst case scenario, I leave my job after 3 years of figuring out if this is what I want to do. I leave my job. I go start this, what appears to be an amazing job over here. And a weekend, I'm like, oh shit, this is not what I expected. And I actually don't want this at all. Well, guess what? I can try to go back to my old job, or I can try to stay there until I secure another job. How many of us know somebody who worked at a place for a very long time and then left for 2 days and was like, "Let this out. I'm going back."
We all know this person, and I believe they were gone for 2 days, and then they were back to their employer.
Yes. And Mr. Mystery Man, if you were listening, you know who you are. But hey,
and we're very glad they went back, by the way.
Oh yeah, he's phenomenal. He's phenomenal. But sometimes we get so stuck in our head and forget that we actually have the right to change our minds.
Absolutely.
And if you have people-pleasing tendencies, check that too. And ask yourself if that is getting in the way of you really exploring whether or not staying or leaving your job is for you.
There's ego factors, right? Like maybe the employment is not healthy for you, but there's just a pride factor of, I don't want to give up. Like it feels like giving up. It feels like giving in. Maybe you love the job. And we've talked about terrible bosses in past episodes. Maybe the job itself you love, but the management is just killing you. And that's really hard because you're stepping away from something you love because there's this other situation. But then again, time. Is this something time limited? Is there a chance that you can work through it with this person? Is there a chance that they're leaving themselves? Weigh the pros and cons. Put it on paper. We've talked about pen to paper in the past, but when these thoughts are in your head and they're just spinning around up there, it can really, really help to put pen to paper and actually look at it.
Sometimes saying it out loud too, or talking to a friend or family member. If you have a partner, share with that person to actually definitely get that person's buy-in.
We encourage you to speak to your partner about these life-changing decisions.
Or not, and then you just come see me for couples things. I don't know.
Continue, Tilly.
So making sure that you're saying things to other people that you trust and talking to them about it, assessing all of these things like Nikki was talking about, the giving up, the giving in, the fear of failure, people pleasing. Is that why you're staying in the job? Just talk to people about it. People you trust.
Yeah, exactly. People you trust. Because so often, once you put it out there to somebody you trust and respect their feedback, sometimes you're going to get a different perspective that really helps you put a fresh, okay, I'm reinvigorated. I do want this. I am committed. Or sometimes they just cut through all of the cloud and all of a sudden give you permission to want something different. I know that happens a lot too, where it's maybe you've kept it inside, you've worried, you've fretted, you've thought, and then you finally approach your partner in tiptoe, right? Or maybe it just all comes out like, I hate my job, I'm miserable. And they're like, then go, then leave. Like, I'll help you look for a job tomorrow. And then the person's like, wait, what? I could have done this 6 months ago kind of thing. So putting it out there to somebody you trust too helps kind of clarify sometimes.
When you say putting it out there, I'm smiling because I've heard there's this theory of putting out in the universe and the universe will return. I personally believe in God. So I believe like when you put it out to the universe, it's God, but I know everybody doesn't believe in God. So whoever you believe in, whether it's the universe or this being or God or whatever spiritual beliefs you have, it seems to have a pretty good return when you put things out there verbally. Opportunities start to kind of open up. I don't know. Try it. See what happens.
If you don't start talking about it, somebody around you might not know that you need a job or you're looking for a new job. And that person in their mind is thinking, you would be perfect for this position. Man, I wish you were available to come work for, or let me recommend you for. So if you don't start talking about it, people aren't going to know.
100%. I'm also a firm believer in networking and connections just with people, right? Because we're all a world full of humans living together. And so many opportunities come from those connections with other humans.
And I want to wrap up something that I think Nikki was saying about just kind of feeling like that stuck during this COVID season, especially. I encourage you to Google the positive stories. There's so much awful stuff that you guys are seeing on the news. And yes, awful things are happening, but media often promotes the awful over the good. But under that, there's so many good things that have happened. So many people that have taken their strengths away from their traditional job to do something amazing with it. And they didn't even know that this was what they were going to do, because it's an opportunity that presented itself now. And they took all their creativity and they took everything that they had with their strengths and they created these solutions. There are so many, and I know it sounds crazy, but there are businesses that have popped up. There are people who have left to do things on their own because they found it's more fulfilling and it's actually much needed right now. So know that there's a lot of hope and opportunity out there. Just trust in yourself. Make your pros and cons list. Think about all of these factors that we talked about today and see if there's other opportunity out there for you that it's better for who you are in your life.
And we hear you. Like, we know that it's not easy. There is no A plus B equals C. Okay, now I'm 110% confident with my decision. We know it's hard. We know that there's uncertainty. But some of these tactics, I think, can at least reduce some of the turmoil that comes with it.
And if you guys need some validation on what it feels like to be scared shitless, visit that episode.
There's an episode for that.
Scared shitless. We all go through it.
All right. So if this episode spoke to you, you're having those concerns. Do I stay? Do I go? That is the question. You know what? Only you will be able to come to the right decision for you. However, you have a support system available to you, whether that be friends, family members, spouse, professional consultation. And everyone's decision is going to be different, right? Sometimes staying in the job is the ultimate right decision for you. Sometimes going is right. So what the fuck do you do?
Whatever you want to do.
All right.
That's basically the answer. Whatever you want to do. You have the power to choose.
Thank you again for joining us on another episode of Therapists Uncut. You can check us out on the first and third Monday of every month. And we greatly appreciate you making mental health part of everyday conversation.
If you have not already, guys, please subscribe so you do not miss an episode. Leave us a review and join us next time. We appreciate you, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Thank you for joining Therapists Uncut, a production of AMP Smart Business. To learn more about Therapists Uncut and stay up on upcoming episodes, please subscribe and follow us on social media. As a reminder, although the Therapists Uncut co-hosts are licensed therapists, they are not your therapists. This podcast is not intended to substitute professional mental health counseling. If you need professional therapy, please contact your local provider or primary care provider. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode of Therapists Uncut.